we're showing you right now, but it will be similar. Additionally, at the conclusion of the webinar, you will have an opportunity to participate in a 7-question survey. We encourage everyone to complete the survey so that we might continue to provide relevant content in all of our presentations. Those who complete the survey will be entered into a drawing for a $25 gift card to Amazon.com, and the winner will be notified by email within 24 hours. We also like to make everyone aware of our upcoming webinars. The one we have next is entitled Development with Data, using exam questions and longitudinal data to develop better assessments, items, and curriculum, and it'll be presented by Jay-Zona Alberto and George Godinez, academic managers at Western University of Health Sciences, College of Dental Medicine. This presentation will focus on their techniques used for developing test questions and is scheduled for Wednesday, July 1st, 2015 at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Please visit www.learn.examsoft.com/resources for more information and to register. The webinar today is being recorded, and within the next few days, all attendees and registrants will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording. Please do share this with all of your colleagues as you like. We want to make sure that the content is getting out there and that people are spreading it, and that you're maintaining or that you're engaging with the content. That way you can retain, the information you learned today and also implement some of the strategies that you learn as well. At this time, I would like to turn this session over to the presenters. Thanks, everybody, and you'll hear again from me at the end of the presentation during the Q&A.
Hello, everyone. This is Michelle Gibson speaking first, and I'll be the main speaker for the presentation. However, when we get to the question and answer period, we may well have Eleni and Amanda help out with answers, depending on where your questions come from. So you heard my bio. I'm Michelle Gibson. I'll just tell you a little bit about Queen's University School of Medicine before we begin. We're located in Kingston, Ontario. It's a small medical school by Canadian standards. We have 100 students per year over a 4-year curriculum. And the first 2 years of the curriculum are basically in class, and the second 2 years of the curriculum are basically in a clerkship setting. So we're going to take you through how and why we implemented the use of ExamSoft and report on our processes and our sort of quality assurance practices to make it work in our particular setting. So first, I'm going to start to talk about why we started using ExamSoft. Before we started using ExamSoft, all of our assessment, with minor exception, was all paper-based. So we had 100 students in first year, 100 students in second year, writing multiple midterms, final examinations. All of these were on paper, which meant that we had to kill entire forests of trees to prepare for the exams. We had concerns about human error issues in that the short answer questions were marked on paper. People had to put marks into a tiny little table, which then had to be input by someone else into a spreadsheet, which we knew was causing problems. We were also concerned about exams being lost. And there were huge workload issues in the house, as we call it, which is the office we're in right now, in terms of managing this huge volume of paper in a short time. So that was definitely one of our concerns. We wanted to reduce the turnaround time in producing marks. We have the same accreditation standards as American medical schools, and if any of you have been through that process, there are strict rules about providing feedback to students in a timely fashion. So this was definitely a driving force for us, as we have just completed an accreditation visit back in April, and mostly the scars have started to fade. We wanted to improve ease of marking short answer questions from a computer base for our markers. Again, not having to get paper copies to them and having them have to be responsible for those and returning them. We really wanted a better question bank. We had an electronic bank, but it really wasn't working for us. It was, as one of our support staff mentioned, and this is somebody who didn't complain, it was soul destroying to use the thing. So that was definitely a driving force to try to get a better bank. And also our students do write the NBME subject exams in clerkship. And in Canada, everybody does the Medical Council of Canada exam at the end of first year, and those were electronic. So there was a thought that it would be helpful to move towards an electronic platform. And after investigating different options, the School of Medicine started using the ExamSoft. This is my cue to tell you that I actually wasn't involved in that decision-making process. I became director of assessment basically as ExamSoft was introduced, and also I have no conflicts of interest to declare with respect to that, which means you're going to hear the honest version of how we introduced ExamSoft. So how are we using the ExamSoft? So basically we use ExamSoft for all of our midterm examinations and finals. We usually have between 3 to 5 midterms in any one term per year, and the same number of finals, so that adds up over the course of the year. In addition to the multiple choice questions, which I think most people are familiar with, we have always had a tradition of using short answer questions, and so that's an example of a short answer question that we have used. And that's the view that the students would see. So I have found this helpful because as somebody who puts questions together, I don't get to see what the student sees. So one of the things that Amanda's been working hard at is taking screenshots of things we're allowed to share to show people who are writing the questions and marking the questions what it looks like. So that's what the students will see. It helps them sort of track as we go through. There are definitely also, on any given exam, lots of multiple choice questions. In terms of marking, we've been through a couple of iterations now of versions of how to mark short answer questions. So I speak to this as somebody who not just directs assessment at the school, but who is a course director and therefore marks a lot of short answer questions myself. So this is the view that I saw recently as I was marking a unit test, which is an equivalent of a midterm around here. And so the students have typed in their answers. This one we chose because I liked this student, because this student was able to use formatting to make it much easier for me to mark. So this is helpful for us when we're trying to sell ExamSoft per se to the people who have to mark in it, who have been marking on paper quite happily, thank you very much, for 10, 20 or more years. So this is what I was able to see, and then over on the right, we have developed sort of some strategies for people to keep track of the sub-scores and before they add up to the total score. What we're able to do much better now is as soon as the students have finished with the exam, the multiple choice question stats are available. So this version is I'll get to in a second, but I'll just speak first to what we do initially. So as soon as the multiple choice questions are done, the item analysis report is generated and sent out the same day to the course director, the member of the student assessment committee, usually myself, to look at the item analysis, and then that way we can quickly begin the process of deciding if there's any questions we're going to remove. This has really dramatically sped up our process, as before we were using Scantron sheets and an ancient Scantron machine that required very special tender love and care in order to work and would always break when you didn't want it to. So I don't even know if I guess the thing is still in the house here somewhere, but probably there'll be a ceremony when we finally can get rid of it. What we discovered, kind of, I will admit, by accident, and has been very helpful, is the ability to generate these reports for students. So this is a report. We've removed the student identification. This student happened to do well on a midterm, and so all of our questions are tagged in the exam bank. Again, in Canada, we are our students take the Medical Council of Canada exam, and the Medical Council of Canada organizes their examination by common clinical presentation. So patients don't show up to the office with already knowing their diagnosis of, for example, pneumonia due to insert bacteria here. They come to the office with a cough. And so our curriculum is organized around these Medical Council of Canada presentations. We ask the course directors to blueprint their courses around the Medical Council of Canada presentations, and then so that what was nice is that because for this course that did a good job of tagging their questions up front, we were able to generate this report for each student so they could see how they did on an overall presentation. There is another report that we use So in terms of how we implemented it, the sort of nuts and bolts, we now tell students, excuse me, when they're accepted to medical school, that they need to have a computer, and we have given them the information about what's required. Fortunately, it has not been onerous. It's not an expensive computer that students require. Many of them far exceed the requirements, but we're certainly budget conscious for our students simply because of the debt load that they carry overall. And so that is now part of our admissions process and fairly clear up front, and has been well received by students. We provide at the beginning of first year, about a week or two before the first set of midterms, hands-on training. So we have a fake exam that we put into ExamSoft. We have the students in the rooms where they'll actually be doing the exams. Amanda runs this as our main coordinator, but we also need to have IT present, and so this way they are getting everything set up that needs to be set up on their computers before an actual midterm, and this has been really helpful with allowing us to troubleshoot individually with students, and students can ask questions, and that's been well received by students. In terms of successes and lessons learned, initially in our first year we tracked, so not surprisingly but worth mentioning, there was no time saving in designing the examination. If you're designing an exam, the work is in looking carefully at your questions, choosing good questions, editing them, writing new questions, and pulling it together. And although we can put these questions together in ExamSoft, we still have face-to-face meetings. Things came as soon as they didn't need to photocopy 100 or more exams. And for us, that really bought us quite a bit of extra flexibility. I'm not going to say time, because we had to deal with the deadlines imposed by our university in terms of printing exams, or we had to find somebody to photocopy these exams in the house. So this was quite significant right off the bat. There is an ability to make changes to the exam until approximately 24 hours before the students are writing, which is a significant improvement from before. So for that inevitable last minute you check and you realize there's a really embarrassing typo in question number 7, you can mostly fix it now, except for in the very, very last minutes. There was much celebrating in our world in that there is no longer a process of collecting 100 exams. And again, these were in the realm of 30 to 40 pages of paper that had to be deconstructed. There's no longer been any errors with respect to the wrong people getting exam questions. I'm not going to say that we've had no errors, and we'll talk a little bit about that in terms of some people not being on the list of needing to get their access to their short answer questions to mark. And certainly we've, just purely on the administrative hours in our first year, we're able to save a huge amount of time just with the paper management. We have to ensure that we have good IT support available during the actual any midterm or final examination. We're well supported here at Queen's from that perspective, and we have dedicated School of Medicine IT personnel, but that certainly might be an issue in other settings. We have always had spare computers available in case of student computer malfunction. Inevitably, the very first one that I went to watch is the one where I think 3 student computers malfunctioned, and that was like the worst one ever. But most of the exams are, we don't need the spare computers at all, or as one perhaps. A very high-tech solution was the students said they found it distracting to have all the keyboard tapping, and so we splurged on earplugs, which has made students very happy. And over the past 2 years, because we've just finished 2 years of using ExamSoft, Amanda and her team have come up with some really good mechanisms to address time loss. So for example, if a student arrives and their computer doesn't work, they have a mechanism for tracking how long it took for them to get up and running, and it's well marked for everybody, so no one can question that that particular student is getting extra time or anything like that, which is a big deal for students, and that has reduced a lot of stress. And the other thing we did is we, especially around the short answer questions, and we are actually still struggling with this, figuring out how to format them. The issue of having to scroll down remains an issue for students, and so some of our, bright, not whiny students have admitted to us that they have fallen to the trap of forgetting to scroll down on a question. So we've tried everything from big bold letters at the top saying this question has 5 parts to now you're at the end of the question, etc. But it's still happening from time to time, so we're still working on that particular front. As mentioned before, the multiple choice questions, that's been a real win for everybody. I think all course directors have found it very helpful to get feedback on their questions right away. The formatting of the item analysis report, once we played with it a bit, has made it really easy to look quickly and make decisions in a timely fashion about whether questions need to be deleted or not. And we like the fact we've been able to customize the report somewhat. So we're just in the process of making some norms so that everybody's using the same thing. Short answer questions is really where our learning curve happened. So first of all, we have many faculty that are marking short answer questions. So in our setting, it's not just one person who runs the course who marks the short answer questions. We may have 10 people marking short answer questions on any given exam. And these may be people that are only teaching for, this might be the only time they're teaching in the year. So they may have taught 2 or 3 sessions in one particular course and they lucked out on getting a short answer question this year. And so we need to be aware of that. So it's not possible in our setting where people work in many different hospitals and have very different schedules to say, hey, everybody come to this orientation session on ExamSoft. So Amanda and the team here were able to, we approached people who were going to mark early on in the process, provided them with some instructions, and then basically what was needed was one-on-one training. Most people were able to function just fine with the instructions, especially once we figured out which browsers didn't work well, which happened to be the ones that our hospitals support, which is nothing new around here. But there's obviously some people that are less comfortable with computers who required more training just to get on, and their feedback is quite different. So as mentioned, the very first thing I checked was to see whether ExamSoft would work with the version of, yes, I'm sorry, Internet Explorer that I'm mandated to use in the hospital, and no, it doesn't. And so we had to let people know that up front because there's nothing happier than a faculty member sitting down to mark an exam and realizing that they can't actually get on. So I think that that's been communicated well. Fortunately, everybody knows the browsers that we have to use in our hospitals are really old, and so it's not new, and ExamSoft is certainly not the only problem we have. But we're now having to be clear with people up front about that. We've made some templates for people who are writing short answer questions as to how to structure it based on both faculty feedback, having marked them, and student feedback, having written them. We surveyed everybody who marked a short answer question and asked them basically what worked in marking a short answer question, what didn't work, and do they have any feedback or tips for the future. The majority of faculty, especially as we worked out some of the bugs with the short answer questions, were positive about it. Not surprisingly, like any new intervention, we had some early adopters who just thrived on it and were quickly able to figure out ways to do some innovative things, and we're really happy about it. And then we had the other extreme. So we had some faculty who noted much frustration with the process. And some of our course directors were very upset because they'd always had students draw. So for example, draw the anatomical structure of something on an exam, and they were no longer able to have students do that. We have actually, since our first year, loosened the strings, and so if drawing is really important, we will sometimes have a one-paper item on an exam, but because the majority of the paper has been dealt with, it's been much less problematic to deal with. And over the course of the year, we could see the feedback from the faculty members becoming more positive and less frequent take-up of our requests for feedback, which to us usually says that people are getting used to it and fairly happy with it. So we just pulled some quotes from our feedback. So the first one I think is, the majority of the faculty, and I certainly would put myself in this category, which is that I enjoyed being able to mark remotely. I enjoyed being able to just sort of, park myself wherever I had good Wi-Fi access and mark some things and not worry about losing them. The not having to decipher student handwriting is not to be minimized, and if you think back to the example that we posted, it was, I've actually been running sessions with students, and I'm going to make this more formal next year, to help them see how to format their answers for short answer questions. They are motivated to do that because I basically tell them it's much easier to mark these questions and they're more likely to get marks. So that's worked well, and we're sort of sharing those tips. But I think the last comment is really important, this is not one faculty member. We have a group of faculty. It is a minority, but they exist, that basically said it was too long to mark as compared to paper. For the most part, I think, although the feedback was anonymous, people haven't been shy in sharing this with us. It's people that are not that comfortable with computers, and we in fact had some faculty members refuse to write or mark short answer questions as long as they're required to use ExamSoft. So it hasn't been by any means completely smooth. In the post-exam process, once we get through the marking, we have again been playing around with the reports that can be produced. So that's another strength and improvement report for students. And we've been being able to provide those to students has been helpful. The other thing that we've been working on more this year is the category reports to the course directors. And in fact, just last week, we ran another workshop for course directors to show them the reports so that they can help, because they can figure out how to tag their questions so that they can get more meaningful reports. And that actually went quite well. So I think the more that we're showing faculty members how to use the features of ExamSoft, the more buy-in that we're getting, and the better quality bank that I think we're developing from the multiple choice question perspective. And certainly the fact that there's been downloading to Excel spreadsheet has been helpful. I'll just back up 1 second. The one thing that I should mention here in the post-exam process is that we had significant issues, and I gather this has been mentioned before. I know Amanda has brought it forward to the Fine ExamSoft team, but the fill in the blanks feature has been not a good experience for us. Some of the faculty members who are frustrated with ExamSoft were unfortunately the ones that were trying fill in the blank questions. So we're actually not using that feature at all at present, simply because we were not able to do this automatic downloading, and it required a lot of manual checking and risk for errors. So that's currently on hold pending, and Amanda's nodding that she has provided that feedback. So we look forward to hearing a solution to that problem. So in terms of next steps, we would like to explore the possibility of using rubrics for short answer questions. So one of the challenges is that it is a small little box to type in, and if people are not comfortable typing, it's hard for people to provide feedback. We've shared lots of tips. I do a lot of cut and paste. Basically, if you're marking 100 short answer questions, students are likely to make about 5 major errors total, and so if you type it up once, you can just cut and paste it into the box to provide the feedback. But rubrics have some appeal. When we discussed it with course directors just last week, one of them commented, though, that if you can't sort of change your marking scheme as you go along, because you read 10 questions and you realize that there was something that went drastically wrong with your teaching, you may want to go back and change that, and having a rubric might not make that possible. So we're probably going to pilot that with a couple of people who are keen on ExamSoft and see how it works. We've considered implementing it into some clerkship courses, but cost is a factor for us, and so that hasn't been pursued. The big focus this year has been optimizing reports for students and faculty, particularly for students to get feedback about their learning, but also for faculty. So our big campaign over the summer is my phrase I've been using is, if you feed and water your ExamSoft questions, they will give more back to you. So we're trying to help people figure out good ways to tag their questions to get more meaningful reports and to be able to make the bank even better. The other thing that we are trying to figure out is processes for feeding back item analysis to question authors. So that it is possible, but right now, at least as far as we've investigated it, will require a lot of manual processing, because we have multiple people writing questions on multiple tests. And so we're working on that so that we can provide the analysis and a bit of an explanation for people who are newish to question writing. And that's one of the things that we're challenged with. The other thing that we are working on is people do like to look at how questions performed previously when they're writing their exam for this year. So for example, I run the geriatrics course in first year. So when I'm putting together my exam, when I'm choosing old questions to include again, I'd like to see the item analysis. Right now, the only way that I'm aware of to do that is to print off my item analysis or have it ready and look at the actual questions and pull it up. And we've said it would be nice to be able to sort of, when searching for a question, see how the question performed previously. So these are the things that we're sort of working through, and these are the questions that we get as well from faculty members. But overall, it has been heading in a positive direction. So we kept the presentation short, so there would be lots of time for questions. Really, this was something we presented at the Canadian Conference for Medical Education as a poster back in April, and then we're approached about doing the webinar. We're by no means experts. We're a small little medical school in small town Ontario, but we're happy to answer questions if it would be helpful to others. And as I mentioned before, I have Amanda and Eleni here with me, so if I can't answer, then I will hand the mic over to them.
Hi there. We do have a couple of questions. The first one is, let's talk longer term, what you're going to be doing with the data that you're getting out of ExamSoft. Maybe 5-year plan. Where do you see yourself then?
So I think in terms of a 5-year plan, I guess maybe more of a vision would be to have, if we keep building the bank, that the course directors would have a better bank to pull from, and that they would be able to give them better information back about the questions and also therefore about how the students are learning. So I'll give a concrete example. Right now, if I want to know how students are doing on the topic of falls of older adults, which is a big one that I talk about, I can run the category report for each test I've done, so for my unit test and my final over the past few years. I don't have a way to look at it as a whole, but it's helpful for me to know that, that on a particular point, like if I'm tagging it properly, that students are doing well on the history-taking part of falls, but falling apart on the management. Our big hope is that we can help provide better data back to faculty members, so to close the loop. But as I mentioned in the last part of my talk, we are struggling a bit with what ExamSoft can and can't do, which is why I'm struggling a bit to answer the question about the 5-year plan. I'm just going to quickly check to see if Amanda or Eleni has anything to add. No, they don't.
Okay, thank you. Another question, and it comes with an admission at the beginning. It says, I'm sure I just missed this, but do you give access to all the faculty to mark the exams?
So do we give access to all the faculty for, I didn't hear the last part of the question, I'm sorry.
It was to mark the exams.
Okay, so the way it works is that when the course director puts together the exam, they tell the teachers who's going to be marking a short answer question. That is then told ultimately to Amanda, who is able to assign that short answer question to that faculty member. And then I'm just checking with Amanda, it's only that faculty member that would normally have access to marking that exam. We can also split it. So I co-teach a session with a colleague, and so we split it so that she marks half and I mark half, and Amanda can do that for us as well. Regular faculty members don't have access to anything else on the particular exam. I'm just checking with Amanda that they can look for their own questions. Is that right?
They can look for questions.
Yes, they can look for questions.
Okay. Next question. Can you go into a little bit of detail about how you handle proctoring?
I'm going to turn that over to Amanda, who is our queen of proctoring.
So proctoring, we actually have proctors that we hired who were trained centrally from the university. I dealt with the Central University exams office where we were able to create our own guidelines for proctoring. We do send out a call for applications, usually in August, for our proctors. They apply, and then we do base them, it is based on their technical experience as well, just, you know, to be able to do a basic shutdown and such as with the computer. We then do training sessions with the proctors, and for any exams when we have 100 students writing at the same time in the room, we do have 4 proctors, which again is usually two male, 2 female. And that's about it. They check the students in and they walk around the room. The students must, at the end of the exam, show the proctor the green screen to show that their exam has been uploaded before they are able to leave the room. So that's kind of one of the main things, is that they have students, if they finish before the end time of the exam, they must raise their hand. The proctor then goes to the student, over to the student, and verifies that the green screen, that their exam was successfully uploaded.
And I think the only other thing I'll add is that we made the decision that for final exams or summative exams, we have students in 2 separate rooms, which allows us to spread them out more. We don't have the flexibility to do that for midterm exams, but the way our midterm exams are structured is they're much lower stakes. We do, for the most part, scramble the answers in the questions.
Very cool. Thank you. Next question. How did you make the cost justification to purchase ExamSoft?
So I personally can't answer that because I wasn't involved in the decision. I'm not sure if Amanda and Eleni were involved at the higher enough point. I know the big picture that I do know that when I took on the Director of Student Assessment was that our costs, primarily in terms of human resource hours, had gone up dramatically in the years leading up to the adoption of ExamSoft. So if I back up, one of the things that we got called on at accreditation in previous years was insufficient formative assessment and insufficient assessment in general. So we had been a very old school, medical school with just one big final exam at the end of the term. And then we ramped it up quite dramatically in terms of, you know, broke it into multiple courses. Each course had to have at least a midterm, etc. So I know that there was a concern in terms of the admin support that the School of Medicine is able to provide to running the entire curriculum, how much time was taken up with exams. We also, I don't think we had any out-and-out disasters that I'm aware of in terms of the paper management of exams, but we had a number of close calls, exams going missing and things like that that people then found. And so that ultimately is what prompted the decision to move forward on the cost front. I think we were at the point of having to decide, do we cut down on the number of assessments that we do because we can't keep supporting them, but it's still an expense. And I'm just checking with Amanda, we don't pass it on to the students, right? The cost? No, so we pay. So it's an ongoing issue, and it's constantly being monitored by our associate dean.
Very cool. Next question. It really comes in the form of a statement, but I'm interested to see what you guys have done as far as alleviating this problem. So the person who asked this question says that they have as a rule that the students need to show the proctors the green screen before they leave, but sometimes the students will shut it down and before they show it to somebody. And so then you don't have the green screen anymore. Have you ever run into that issue? And if so, what have you done?
So yes, we have ran into that issue. I mean, it does usually happen at least once during each exam period. And in that case, our proctors we are fortunate enough that our administrative staff is very, very close to where exams are written. They're located closely. So what we do is the proctor, in that case, the proctor calls over usually to myself or a member of my team, where we then can log in on the back end to see if the student did upload their exam successfully. Whereas for the most part, they all have uploaded their exam successfully. they just sometimes forget and close their laptop. So, but we've dealt with that, and it's quite easy to look from the administrator end to see that it was successful in loading.
Okay. Okay, and have you ever had any problems with like a computer crashing during an exam?
Yes, we have. I think most times when computers crash, most things have been due to students either have a very, very old laptop that they're using, or they forget to disable their antivirus software, so that can cause some problems. Most issues that we have are a matter of doing a restart to the computer. So it's just a hard reboot, and the nice part, when you do a hard reboot in the middle of an exam, it automatically opens up soft test again, and the student just continues to write where they left off.
And I'm just checking with Amanda, that's where we track the time where they were down?
Yes.
And so they get that time back again at the end.
Correct.
Yeah. I think we had the Wi-Fi go down once on our end or something. Anyway, yeah, we got through that as well. It was our first set of finals, so it made me really happy.
Okay, next question. Do you gather consent from students to store their information on U.S. servers? And if so, how do you deal with students who decline to consent?
So I can answer that question in that Matt Simpson is usually the one who answers that question for us. I'm just blanking on his title. He's the guy that solves these problems for me, but he has a title. Anyway, so he said that the chief information officer at Queen's is the person that they've been in contact with, and I know because we got asked this question at CCME that Matt's answer was that the thought at Queen's is that it doesn't matter where the data is stored, Canada versus the US, etc. And so it has been a non-issue for us so far. Matt did comment that the Chief Information Officer at Queen's is perhaps more forward-thinking than in some other facilities, so some people might have more barriers to that. So we don't ask for explicit consent, as far as I'm aware, because we stay with Queen's policies.
Okay, and can you also speak about having your own data on U.S. servers? And if there was any sort of process you had to go through to make sure that would be okay with the school?
I think it's the same thing. Unfortunately, Matt is in the midst of launching some big new project that has to go live for new residents on July 1st, which is why I couldn't be here today. But if anyone wanted to email me at gibson@queensu.ca, I could forward the question to him. But I know it has not been an issue in the 2 years that we've used it. All of our curricular material is, we have our own curriculum management system that is Queen's designed, so it's not that part of things is fine. So it's really just the exam soft material, but it has not been an issue, largely because we've been operating under the umbrella of how Queen's operates.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Next question. Can you go into some detail about how you make sure that the minimum user requirements are taken care of? Do you provide students with something that says you must have this laptop, that then, that way you can make sure that all your students really can use the software?
Yes, so upon students receiving acceptance, upon them accepting their admission offer, we do send out all of those students the requirements, letting them know that we do use an electronic that we use soft test to administer all exams, so that they are required to have a personal laptop. And we do state we send them links with what the requirements are for those laptops as well.
And then I know, as I said, we always run a practice exam early on in the first month of medical school. And thus far, as I said, it has not been an issue. I guess we'll have to see. It's now just simply part of the package that they get. It's like, these are the things you're going to need when you come to medical school. But I know when we discussed it at the Student Assessment Committee, I mean, there was a real effort to ensure that it was not going to be a financially onerous proposition for students that they would have to buy some top-end laptop. At the time, it was a couple of years ago now that we discussed it, Amanda and Matt sort of looked at it in terms of the Queen's Computer Store, et cetera, just to get an idea of how much was in the order. It was well under $1,000, and I think like under $500 often. So it was, in the grand scheme of how much tuition they pay, quite minor. And certainly some students use the very basic laptops. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and do you have students using both Windows and Mac, or do you have them all on one?
No, our students are basically split close to 50-50 depending on each class, but we're running both Mac and PC.
Okay. Next question. Will you ever use the data that you're getting from ExamSoft to go back and look at your curriculum and say, well, maybe we need to make some tweaks here?
Yes. And that's a huge part of our tagging campaign over the summer. So we have a program evaluation committee, and that also is an accreditation requirement. So right now, the main sources of data that the Program Evaluation Committee can look at is how our students have done on the different components of the Medical Council of Canada exam, and then what students write on the Canadian Graduate Questionnaire, and we have a very high rate for that because we lock them in a room and make them do it and give them food. So we get about 100% rate. But what we don't have is great data at the sort of course level or year level. So as I said, this was one of the things that I really, when I found the categories report particularly helpful for me. Before, we didn't have any way of combining, as I said, all the questions on falls to see, did students do badly over on falls? So the example that we showed in the presentation is from our first term course on family medicine, which is it's the example I use all the time because people can really get it. So you can see on that particular exam, students did well overall on the high blood pressure presentation, but didn't do as well on fever. And so that immediately feeds back to the course director. But what we would like to do is be able to look at, over the course of several years, students consistently doing badly on fever. Even better, if it were possible, and when we last asked it wasn't, it would be nice to be able to look at all the questions on fever over the course of the entire curriculum to see if there's a pattern there, because right now it's only course specific. And so once we get, but the reason I'm focusing on the tagging is when you run the categories reports, if the questions haven't been tagged meaningfully, it's a garbage in, garbage out phenomenon. So all you get is the questions according to author, or whether they're new or imported, which doesn't provide any meaningful information. So I would say that would be something we'd like to do. Right now, we're able to do it on sort of a small feedback loop within the iteration of the course, but even then, it's very dependent on the tagging. So thus the big campaign to show course directors and to show them it's not that time-consuming to provide meaningful tags for the questions, and then generate the reports for them so they can see right off the bat. But ultimately, it would feed nicely to the Program Evaluation Committee to look at.
Okay, next is, how did you determine how you would actually tag your questions and set up your category tree?
So we started out with less is more. So we started out with, the framework for our curriculum is the Medical Council of Canada presentations, and we have a book that we call the Red Book, which is our document that describes our competencies that our graduates will have at the time of exiting our medical school. And that's organized under the CanMeds framework. So we have medical expert, scholar, communicator, collaborator. Under each of those, we have broken down into actual objectives. So around here, we all run around saying things like, oh yeah, that's ME 2.1a, which I happen to know is, the students will be able to describe the normal physiology and anatomy of etc. So the bare minimum was every question had to be tagged with a curricular objective, because basically we say you can't be asking questions that don't map to our overall curricular objectives document. And then in the vast majority of cases, they had to tag Biomedical Council of Canada presentation. The exception there is some of our basic science courses, because they don't have a lot of presentations attached. So the anatomy course, it's not so much, about, cough doesn't link just to one anatomical structure. So we started with that and encouraged people to put in keywords. So this has just been this iterative process over the past year when I started playing around with the categories reports, realizing that if people tagged more meaningfully with keywords that make sense in their course, they'll get more meaningful reports. So for example, in our respiratory course, which runs in second year, the Medical Council of Canada basically has 3 presentations that cover the entirety of the course. So people either cough, they produce sputum, or they're short of breath. And the shortness of breath presentation, dyspnea, covers off a huge majority of the course. So the report was kind of useless, because it would say, on this exam of 30 questions, 24 of them had to do with shortness of breath, and that's all it said, which didn't break it down. So then we were able to figure out that if the course director went back and tagged according to the themes that she had in her course, so that's sort of, in her case, upper airway disease, lower airway disease, etc., then that would make a whole lot more sense. In the course that I run, for example, I map nicely into the Medical Council of Canada presentations for the most part, in the geriatrics portion, but in the, my course also includes our oncology portion. Again, it wasn't so presentation based. So in that case, the unit director decided to tag the questions according to the major themes that she runs in her unit. And so now she's getting more useful information. And so what we're encouraging people to do is to be iterative about it. Look at the report that you've got. We found the faculty view to print the actual exam has been very helpful, because you get basically a blueprint at the front, and then also it pops up with each question has the actual tags attached to it. So it's the key for us is to make it user friendly, because everyone's busy. So what we did at our workshop just on Friday is we gave people that. Here's your item analysis. Here's your faculty version of your report. And here's how you generate the categories report. And you can look right at it and decide, what do I want to pull out? So some people are going to be tagging according to sort of key diagnoses. And so the thread that links everything is the Medical Council of Canada presentations and the curricular objectives. But then people are starting to use specific words. And so I think it's going to have to keep being iterative. If we get to the point where ExamSoft allows us to combine courses, we'll probably come up with we'll sort of normalize things and have a sort of standardized list. One course is trying that next year. So they're a course that has a cast of thousands in terms of people, a lot of guest lecturers. And so they're coming up with their sort of official stamped list of ways to tag the questions so that it's consistent. So I think we're in sort of just the very beginnings of the next phase of that. And then we have some operational issues we have to resolve. So question author is a complicated one. It should be easy, but if somebody wrote the question and then somebody edited it, do they both get their name on the question? These are the things that we're working on right now. Anyway, so long story short, we started with less is more. And it works really well in some courses. Other courses need to tag differently, and so the big plan for this year is better tagging, and then we'll review next year. Fortunately, full credit to ExamSoft on this. It's easy to tag and it's easy to untag, so that makes it much, especially that report. I find this stuff by, it drives Amanda a bit nuts, but randomly clicking places when I'm doing my own course. And I think it's important, that's important. Like it's sort of cheesy cliche expression, but I walk the walk. I am a course director. So when I'm saying to other course directors, this is why it's important to do this. I have some credibility as opposed to some ivory tower person talking off in the distance. So that's really where we've been working on. Is we're still at this point trying to make it really useful at the course level, and then I hope it can expand more. We don't have an infinite number of courses. I mean, we have the first 2 years of the curriculum. There's, just doing a quick calculation here, probably 20, 25 courses. So we could normalize things down the road.
Very cool. Can you speak to whether or not you're using item analysis, and if you are, what you're doing as far as the process to revise those items goes?
Yep. So the first step with item analysis, so just a tip if people are new to ExamSoft, you want to choose the option for running the report that includes the question and all the answers and the distractors. It's so much easier. I discovered that one. That was a dance of joy moment for everybody. So the first step that we do is we decide if we're going to delete a question from a particular exam. We have refrained from having hard and fast criteria for deleting. We have guidelines about which questions need to be looked at carefully. So we have medical students, and the one thing you can assume is that medical students study. Our students are under intense pressure, regardless of what we do, to perform. And so we know that you can assume that students have studied just about everything that's on that test. As you saw, our averages are high. We try to write questions from a sort of criterion reference perspective. So what do people absolutely need to know to be a good doctor, not norm reference to spread out the class. So having prefaced with that, we basically look at any question in which under 60% of the class got it right. It doesn't mean we delete it by any means, but it's just sort of that's a low number for us. It's usually on an average exam no more than, if there were 60 questions on an exam, maybe 2 or 3 questions might flag to that. So we look at that first, and then we look at the RPB first to see if it's negative or positive. And so, because I always have to explain this to people that don't have any background, I sort of say if it's negative, roughly speaking, and stats people, please don't shoot me, but I just say if it's negative and students didn't do well in the question, it means that, quote, poor students were more likely to get it right than, quote, strong students. So that just helps the people who are making, the course directors help them to understand and interpret. If a question is deemed to be difficult but discriminating, in the grand scheme of an exam, we'll usually keep it. If a question is difficult but with the negative RPB, most often we'll pull it, we won't count it in that exam, and we will feed it back to the course director and the person who wrote it to try to understand. We do always check, I should just mention, was the correct answer tagged properly? Sometimes that doesn't happen. And the other thing that we do is we look to see is, because we collect feedback from the students, they have a piece of paper they can write on about questions that were confusing to them. So if 30 students in the class said, I wasn't sure how to answer this question, because we may accept for that particular year 2 right answers on the question, just to get through that particular exam. It would be extremely rare for us to keep a question in which 25% or below of the class got it correct. We only use 1 correct answer and 3 distractors, so we're down into the more less into the realm of just chance. And it does show us that there's and you can tell I say this a lot, there appears to be a disconnect between what was taught and what the students learned, and how the question was phrased. So we look at that. So that's our first step. I will confess that's usually as far as we get, although we are now actively working at the next step, which is to then feed back to people, and some groups are doing this much better than others, where we say, look at all of the answers on your question. Was there a strong second place? So a common pattern we see is 80% of the students picked A, which is the correct answer, and 19% of students picked B. What does that tell you? What information do you get back? Is that what you wanted? Is that a common wrong answer for somebody who just wasn't quite getting the concept, which is probably good to know.
guidelines to follow with regards to like phase 2 to the 2 and how we're using that report to feedback exam performance to faculty. We're getting huge buy-in. It's the first time that they're telling us that they're able to see how their questions have performed on an exam, and they're very keen and interested in having one-on-ones with myself, either in a group setting when they review the exam as a team or one-on-one. So we're getting huge buy-in because they're able to look at how their questions performed in relationship to their course and other people teaching.
All right, and it looks like we have just one more minute before we're going to need to close out of this webinar and let everybody get on with their day. And so the final question, this one's making me smile. So this is a person from Ontario as well, and they want to know that if they wanted to come to Queens and visit with you guys, if you would entertain their visit.
Absolutely, and I'm not contagious. No, we've had people visit, and we're happy to share experiences. Just email us.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for doing this webinar and also for sustaining that pretty extended question and answer session. I feel like it was really productive, and everybody, we actually answered every single question, so good timing as well.